This is Conversations with Women in Sales, an award-winning podcast created by Barbara Giamanco, who hosted the first 67 episodes. Listen to interviews with amazing women about their journeys in their sales careers, often discussing sales leadership tips, ideas, and strategies. We aim to inspire women to consider a sales career and for some women to grow into sales leadership. Men, we appreciate your allyship. And now, your host, Lori Richardson.
I am here today with Nirvanna Lindharrie. And Nirvanna and I met a while back in Boston. We're going to talk about it today. Nirvanna is the AE team lead at Column, and she's in Raleigh, North Carolina right now. So great to see you again, Nirvanna.
Yeah, great to see you too, Lori.
Yeah, I remember when I met you, I think it was in an elevator. It was in a building. We were in the wrong building, or I can't remember what it was, but it was a professional development evening, maybe a women in business thing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think that's when we met in person, but I think I had emailed you before because I mistook you for another author with a really similar name. I prospected you and I was looking for somebody to come in and talk to us about sales at my first company that I worked in sales with. And then when I met you in the elevator, I knew exactly who you were.
Oh,
And so it was like meeting a celebrity.
wow, that's so funny. I just remember your drive and your interest in developing professionally, and it stuck with me. I thought about it a number of times, and I've watched as your career has grown. And most recently, you had a post that I want to talk about in a little bit on LinkedIn. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you decided to get into sales initially.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned, right now I'm the AE team lead at Column. And this is my first management job. I guess I can call it my second management job because I recently moved from the business development team lead to the AE team lead at Column. So I'm in my second management gig, but I've been working in sales for over 8 years. I studied sociology at Tufts, graduated in 2014. And at that point, if you asked me if I was going to do sales, I would be like, no, probably not. I
Now,
definitely had
did you grow up in Boston, or did you come to Boston for college?
I came to Boston for college. I grew up in Long Island in New York. And I had this impression of salespeople that most people do, like the sleazy used car salesman, like the Better Call Saul, right? And I know it's terrible. I hate it now that I actually work in sales. And so I started my career in a career center in a business school. And it was a really boring job. It was very administrative. And I found myself on their job board and found an account executive position. But of course, at that age, I was 21. I was like, what does account executive even mean? But I read the job description and I was like, okay, this is all stuff that I can do. And I knew what the company did. It was in ad tech, and I had an internship that was with advertising in a magazine. So I did some LinkedIn prospecting. I networked and found out that the director of sales was an alum of Tufts as well, reached out to him, and then got an interview, even though they weren't hiring like entry level people for that role. And then in my interview, I know, in my interview, I was like, wait, this is a sales role. But at that point, I was so sold on the company that I was like, all right, this is where I want to be. And then I got the job, and that was my first sales job as an account executive with Criteo.
Wow. So you skipped the BDR, SDR phase.
Yeah,
That point.
I was never a BDR or an SDR, and I think that's part of why I like sales too. I think that there's like definitely churn after that role because I always tell my team, like my business development team, yeah, the AEs have revenue responsibility. That's why they get paid more, but your job is harder. I like let them know, like I know how soul sucking it can be to just be reaching out to people and getting constantly rejected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then, did I know you when you were at cardio, or
No, it's Criteo. It's a made up word, so don't worry about saying it wrong. But I don't think so. That was my first sales job, and I was only there for about a year because I got put on a pit by the end of my career there. Like my first 2 quarters, I killed it, but I was on a ramp goal. And then the second 2 quarters, I was at 70% to goal, and they were a company that actually expects you to hit 100% of your goal, unlike most of the other companies I've been with since then. And
yeah.
so they were like, we need you to make us this much money in a month or we're going to terminate your employment. And I was like, I couldn't do that in 3 months. So I actually left. But, at that point, I didn't know if I was going to stay in sales. I was like, I don't know if I'm good at this. But I interviewed and found another role that was very similar. at a company that was also very similar, also in the ad tech space, but working under a woman by the name of Connie Johnson, who was one of the founders of that company, Owner IQ at the time. And they got bought, and I can't remember what the company that bought them is called, but I clicked with the boss and I was like, okay, I think I'm actually going to learn something working with her. I was at Owner IQ for nearly 3 years. And then I wanted to make a move into SaaS. And that was really hard because when I started interviewing for SaaS companies, they were like, you basically have no years of experience because you don't know our pricing model.
That's crazy.
I
SaaS is
know.
a platform. It's
I know.
nothing more. And
Yeah.
you can sell. It's like a subscription.
Yeah, exactly. The only difference is the pricing model, but I had been selling for 4 years and they were telling me, no, this counts as 0 years. But I ended up I had to move down from enterprise to mid-market in order to move into SaaS and took like a giant pay cut. But that was fine because I eventually worked my way back up and that's how I got into SaaS. And I think I met you probably between the time I was at Owner IQ and Robin, which was the first SaaS company I worked for.
That's great. And so you knew you were made for sales at that point? I mean,
At that point, I knew I was good at it because I was like, okay, I was seeing success finally. I like understood how to plan for a pipeline. I was like getting it. I was understanding the rules of the game. But I didn't know that sales was going to be it until I started going to women in sales networking events in Boston. And that's when I realized, I mean, I had a female manager at Criteo and then I had a female manager at Owner IQ, but I didn't realize that women in sales leadership positions were so low. Like the first women in sales event I went to, I was so excited to meet other women in sales. I didn't have that many coworkers who were women. And I met some women, but they were like sales enablement or sales recruitment. And then I met like a bunch of women from a larger company in Boston, and they were like, oh, there's 7 of us on our sales floor. And I was like, yeah, but how many salespeople do you have? And then they were like 40. And I was like, okay, same ratio.
yeah.
So then I was like, okay, this is a problem. And um, I was like, this is what I want to do because I had also had this idealistic vision for myself to inspire others. And so it's maybe I can take this career that I'm building and run with it and like just take it as far as I can go. So
that's what you're doing today, right?
Right.
I just want you to know that because your story is going to be heard by other people who are on the fence about sales, or maybe they're in sales, but they don't know if they want to be in leadership. And there are a lot of women in sales who we've lost over the past few years. First, because of the pandemic, and then second, because of some of these crazy job cuts and rifts. Because a lot of women and people of color were the last people to be hired. And a lot of those were the first people to go.
Yeah.
It's really important. And I'm really glad that you're here for that. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened after Robin?
Robin was cool because we were selling a workplace tool and I loved like the behavioral psychology behind it as a sociology major. Just loved talking about it. And it was my first startup too. And at every company I had been working at before then, I was one of the youngest people and it was very hierarchical. And if I had a good idea, it had to go through my boss. But at Robin, I was like, whoa, this is like a school club. Like I can have a voice here. Yeah. So I can have an impact. So I really loved startups. And it took me 4 years to get to my first startup. But now that I've been working in startups, I'm like, okay, like people who are fresh out of college, who are smart and motivated need to work at startups. It's just way more fun. We were selling a workplace tool and then a pandemic happened. And it was crazy. It was really interesting being part of that business during that time. We sold meeting room booking and also desk booking. Our desk booking product started blowing up because people wanted to keep track of who was in the office, but the meeting room booking product was churning, just because nobody was in the office. Right. And so it was this interesting time in our business. I still managed to do pretty well in enterprise, but I just was not feeling good selling a tool to people who are like in their kitchens, in their dining rooms with like their laundry bin behind them, being like, the office is going to open in September. Yeah. The office is going to open in December. Like trying to create urgency and saying, you need this when I wasn't really sure if they did need it. And I lived in Chelsea, Massachusetts, which was hit like proportionately as hard as New York with the pandemic. And it was also 80% essential workers, a lot of immigrants living there and people who were too afraid to seek help. And there were literally tanks on my street outside my window handing out food. And I'm
Oh,
here in the middle of the pandemic, which was like a crazy time
I had
politically.
no idea. Wow.
Yeah.
That
And
is
I was like, I need to use my powers for good. I just wanted to
wow.
do something a little bit more like social impacty.
Something that really made a difference. So what did you do then?
Yeah, Robin ended up having layoffs, and that broke my heart because I was so invested in the company. I took it very personally. They like fired a bunch of my friends and like people who I thought were good workers. And they also weren't promoting me and they didn't have any timeline. And I had already asked twice. So I was just like, all right, I think I'm going to just find another job. Found another job with a company called Ripple Match, and they do diversity recruitment and their tool is solid. It's actually like really cool. I sold that for about a year, but when I started, I spoke to the CEO this time and I was like, I want to be a manager. And they were like, what do you think about 18 months? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. But then around 12 months in, they're like, we're a startup and we don't have the resources to train you. So we are hiring a manager, but it's going to be external. And so then I started looking for jobs again. And yeah, I ended up leaving Ripple Match and pursuing a manager role full time.
Yeah. And then you found it.
I found one. Yeah, and it was a crazy journey because at first I was looking for a sales manager role with an SMB team with a Series B company. I had a very specific vision and I kept broadening the scope of what I would look for. I was like, okay, I guess I would be like a player coach at a very tiny startup, or I guess I would manage business development or sales development if that's what I can get. And then somebody on a phone screen, a recruiter was like, hey, do you have team lead experience? And I was like, team lead, that's the word I haven't been searching for. I
Wow.
searched for team lead, and that's how I found Column. And I was really into Column also because they have a social impact mission as well. They're a B Corp and a public benefit company.
Oh, that's neat. And what does Colin do? Because I'm not familiar.
Oh, it's so interesting, Lori. So they make a tool that helps with public notices. So s- in the United States, an event will occur where the court will order a public notice to
Right.
take place in a newspaper. It needs to be in print in a
Yeah.
newspaper
Which is so
legally.
funny today, right? No one's
Right.
reading newspapers.
Yeah, it's definitely a struggling medium for sure.
It
And
hasn't changed, huh? It's still required in print.
yep, still required in print, and actually legislation is trying to fight that. But the guy who started our company, Jake Seaton, comes from a fifth generation newspaper family,
All
and
right.
there are reasons why local news needs to stay alive.
Oh, totally
Like
agree.
mass media is where you get the fake news,
Yeah.
whereas like local news is
Community media is so important. And
yeah,
I miss local papers. I really do. A lot of them have gone under. I saw that in
yeah.
the Boston area. It's really sad to see so much.
Yeah, it does help people care about their community. It helps people be more active in democracy. And so, like, we are supporting the newspapers and we make a tool that's free for them and it helps them process their public notices. But we also make it for their advertisers to improve the experience so it's not so like manual and
Yeah.
outdated. And the advertisers pay when they use the tool. So it's a really interesting model. But what's interesting about this sales opportunity is it's pretty hard because we're selling a tool to people who are not early adopters of technology. And it's been really interesting,
Yeah.
to say the least.
I bet. Now I get the name. That makes sense. One of the things that you talked about, and I want to look and see, you talked about how you keep a list of achievements and you talked
Mhm.
about gold star emails. Can you say something about that? Because I think it's so important.
Yeah, I had a mentor in my first job before I started working in sales who mentioned that I should keep a list of achievements. And so I just every time I start a new job, I open up a Google Doc on my personal drive and like on a monthly, quarterly, or like just when something comes up basis, I will just jot down some notes about what I'm working on and what I'm achieving. Because when the time comes to to represent myself either with performance reviews or updating a resume, I don't have to be like, what numbers did I hit in
Yeah.
Q3? And what was like a story of something that I overcame?
I don't remember. It's like,
Yeah.
I know I've done events where I didn't even remember them until someone said, "Hey, I saw you at that one event." And I learned this lesson from a woman who also is in the Boston, or she used to be in the Boston. She's still in the Boston area. We're not. And she posted all of the panels that she was on, all the speaking engagements, and on her LinkedIn
Mhm.
in the very top part. And so she had about this much just listening after listening about all these different diversity and women in sales panels and things that she had been on. And Amazon found her, and because they knew they were looking for someone who could build a diverse team. She was a leader, and they saw it on her LinkedIn and invited her to interview. And she's with Amazon now. And it's really interesting because not only is it good for you, but if you share some of that publicly, good for your prospect, your future prospects, as well as for other people to see. So it's got a lot of purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. I really am a big believer in LinkedIn too. Huge LinkedIn poster.
Yeah.
And like just posting stuff, people reach out to you. You reached out to me after I posted something and now I'm on this webinar. Just
Yeah.
putting yourself out there is how you like give people ideas for opportunities for you. So
People are connected to you, but they're not necessarily thinking of you because they haven't seen I haven't seen your post for a long time for whatever the algorithm.
yeah.
It's not, it doesn't work for me. I have to, I've created my own list of people that I check on. And you need to do that to put yourself out there. In the old days, we would go to companies in person and set up meetings, and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. We were just talking about." Now we do it virtually, and it's really important. Yeah. So posting on LinkedIn is really great because I know a lot of women lurk on LinkedIn. They read and they follow, but they don't post themselves. And did you have any trouble starting to post at some?
I can't even remember when I started posting, but I just started, I think initially as a salesperson, I was posting a lot about my company and what my company was doing and trying to use that for social selling and engaging customers. But after a while, I think I really just wanted to have a personal brand. And there's this guy, Andrew Mewborn, who has the Brand 30 program.
I
did it.
Cohort right now, actually.
I did a cohort.
It's my second time, and I'm a long time LinkedIn person.
Yeah, I didn't read all the articles in the cohort. It was more cool to join the community. And for me, I was like, okay, I get it. Like you post every day for 30 days to see what happens.
Yeah.
And that just got me in the habit of it. I fall off every once in a while when work's really busy and I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to write right now. I do tend to write, like in live, I don't write ahead of time. I like let inspiration strike me, which I think is what makes it hard to be consistent.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. So one of the things that the reason that I was thinking about you and why I reached out was because you posted about your promotion to account executive team lead. And you talked about your journey, about how you were an account executive and you started as a BD team lead. But you talked about how you've designed a strategy and process and how you've increased opportunities for the reps. And what I loved is that you talked about how you tried everything first before you had anybody on your team do it, which is really beyond what most people would do. And I think it's really great. And I just think it's nice that you have a plan for yourself. And I waited for people to tap me on the shoulder and they never did. So what do you say to what drives you and how do you know when it's time to go or stay?
Yeah, that's tough. I think as a younger person, like my resume doesn't always shine because I've worked so many places. But from my perspective, especially being at a startup, I think it's great that I've had so many varied experiences. And I always want to stay. I always want to stay. It would be cool to be with a company for a really long time. And that's my hope for Column. Like, I do want to stay with the company and grow it. But I think that I've just known that I've wanted to be a manager. Like, I knew I wanted to be a manager for like since 2018. And then I actually quit my job and started actively looking for it in 2022. So it took me like 4 years to be like, I am going to go after this and I'm not going to take no for an answer anymore. And I think that what happened was I just got frustrated with all the no's. People like to tell you that you can't do stuff. And what they mean is that they can't do stuff. They're like, oh, you can't sell SaaS because you sold ad tech and you don't understand our pricing model. And I'm just like, yes, I can. Oh, like people like to tell you that you can't do stuff. They're like, oh, you can't be a manager because you don't have any management experience.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but yeah, it's like, okay, I can learn, I can figure it out. And I didn't teach myself.
It could be really discriminatory because over the years, traditionally men are looked at for what they could achieve and women are looked at for what they've done already.
Yeah.
And it's just a fact. It's been verified
Yeah.
many times. And so it's unusual to find a company or find leadership where they go, you know what? You haven't done it, but we're going to give you that opportunity. It's
Yeah.
so refreshing. And I think that's the important lesson here is that you need to go where it sounds for you, like you have to be inspired with the product or service.
Yeah.
And also the people have to be open to growth and to supporting your goals.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it, like open to growth, because I think another place where people can get stuck, especially women, is if you're a consistent performer and they don't want to move you because they're afraid of for their numbers. And I think I don't know, but I have a feeling that's happened to me before. So,
Me,
mhm.
you're so good at what you do. You're top contributor. I was always in the top 10 in the companies I worked at. Never really wanted to be number one, but I wanted to be in the top 10. And I never was really asked to be a leader or a team lead. I did that on my own. And I think that's the thing we do as women too, is like we do extra stuff. Oh, here, let me train you on that. I'll show you how to do it. I'll teach you how this, like back college, she started
Yeah.
doing stuff on her own for free. And she held an event in San Francisco where she lived for SDRs to be more successful because she just didn't want to see them fail.
Yeah. But I think that's also, those are the things that you're supposed to be writing down and sharing. If you help a team member onboard, get that team member to write you a LinkedIn recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that way, mentally, you're never doing anything for free. And I think that's an important thing for me. I do own my own company and I have for a long time. And I try to explain to people if you don't have the dollars, there are other ways. There's other kinds of currency. It could be a recommendation or an introduction. Or I've had people introduce me to multiple companies because of the value that I brought them. And it just gets you away from just, you don't do things for free. You don't need to do things for free at this point in your career. And people should know all the value that you bring. And it's up to us to to remind people. And your boss might know, but your boss's boss doesn't know. That's why it's important.
Yeah, definitely. You got to create visibility for yourself.
Yeah. So what do you think? How do you think we'll get more women into sales and leadership?
Yeah. In terms of getting women into sales, I feel like the women that are in sales have to be the ones to say, hey, come on in. Think about, I mean, like, I think about when I was at Robin, I worked with two BDRs as an enterprise AE. And one of them was definitely like, I think I want to be a marketer. And that was fine. But the other one wasn't sure. And I think something about the sales like space as a whole for a while is that it hasn't been the most welcoming for women. Like, sexual harassment is a thing. And one of the women was like, I don't know if I want to work with all these men. Like, she said that she had worked at another large tech company with a very good brand name, and like these sales guys like saw her come in and they were like, hey, are you going to bake? Because she's a woman, she has to make cookies or something. Like like that's sexual harassment. And
Yeah.
like people are just unbelievable sometimes. And I think that
Yeah.
like we like that's another thing that young women are afraid of.
Yeah. Do you think it's any better being more virtual?
Potentially. Yeah, I think it could be. And I think also like having people understand that sales is like relational and can use a lot of the skills that people are learning. I don't know. Like I think that there are schools with sales programs that are incredibly competitive, but like going to a liberal arts school where there's like English majors and psychology majors and sociology, what I studied, and showing them that, hey, you can use these writing skills and these skills that you have that make you interested in people in a career in like sales. And just, I think if it comes from a woman, it will be more powerful. But also like career changers, another great place to find women who like are ready to make a buck because like they've been through the ringer, they've worked other jobs, maybe they have children and they're like ready to hustle for some money. And like tech sales is a great place to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. For
Yeah.
That's great. Do you have any book that you would recommend or
Mhm.
podcast or?
Yeah, I know, like for sales books written by women, I would love any recommendations you have there, but I do have two books came to mind that are not sales books. One of them is The Leader Lab by Tanya Luna and Leanne Renninger. And so
Oh,
this book is for I like it's better than Making of a Manager. I can't believe I didn't hear about this before I started my management job. I learned about it from our head of people, Melissa Tice, who's amazing. And the book is like literally scientifically based tactics that you can use to be a better manager. So, for example, like when somebody comes to you with a problem, rather than solving it right away, asking more questions, which I think can also help you in sales. Because that's called Q stepping. And they've got lots of like little tips like that, which I think
what?
are really great. And it reads like a magazine. So it's awesome.
Oh, what a
Um,
good recommendation.
Another one is Radical Candor by Kim Scott,
Yeah.
which I read that a long time ago, but one thing that I've encountered in management that's been something that I'm working on actively is not being ruinously empathetic.
Wow.
And so by
You
that I mean,
understanding.
yeah, too understanding and
Oh,
not putting your foot down and just being like, these are the expectations
yeah.
and like what telling somebody like when they're not meeting your expectations without worrying about how they feel,
Yeah.
and
You're
I
doing
think,
them a favor if they're not good at their role. And
yeah,
most people want to know if they know that.
yeah,
That's why I use assessment tools because it's very spelled out and clear. And usually people say, oh, in fact, I remember recently someone said this manager came out with a very low score. And the people that had referred me there said, oh, he's going to be really mad. He's not going to that at all. And I said, oh, go talk to him and see what he says. And when we got done going over all of the things that showed up, he said, I hate being a manager.
oh,
I know I'm not good at it. And I want to be an individual contributor again. And it was like a load was lift off his shoulders
yeah,
because we knew that he knew that we knew because of how he scored. And it was based on his answers.
yeah,
So it was doing him a favor.
yeah.
Really. So here's another one I'm going to recommend to you. Love Your
Ooh,
Team, A Survival Guide for Sales Managers in the Hybrid World, written by Helen Finucci. She's a manager, or, I'm sorry, she's a sales leader executive at Microsoft. And what's great about this book is that it's divided into sections and it actually has conversations that you can give as a manager. You say this, and it tells you what to say for different issues that you're dealing with.
that's really helpful. Love that.
Yeah, it's been such a great. I interviewed her for a previous episode too.
Cool.
Podcast. Yeah, that's great.
I find that really helpful. There's a lot of coaching advice that get people to think for themselves, but like when somebody tells you exactly what to say, it's jackpot. Like this
Yeah.
is the good stuff.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. Be sure to check that out. No,
Cool.
it's been so great to have you, and I really appreciate it. It's good to see you again. And I'm going to be keeping my eye out on your career and for continued growth. And we're really excited. I will just keep in touch on LinkedIn, and I wish you all great things.
Thank you, Lori. That means so much. Thank you for having me. And it was really great to see you too. I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
Big shout out to our official sponsor, Reprise, the leading full funnel, product led growth platform. With Reprise, your sales team creates, presents, and shares product demos perfectly customized for each step of your sales motion. Go to getreprise.com/womenInSales to try for free today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations with Women in Sales. You can find all of our episodes at womensalespros.com/podcast. Help us spread the word and let's change the face of B2B sales.